I'm Jeff Cook.
And I'm TJ Wilson.
And this is Around the Circle.
I'm walking slowly. I'm taking my time. All I could talking is starting to rhyme. I'm letting go of lonely, letting go of strife. I just can't get enough of this beautiful life.
The Enneagram is a map of the human personality. It's a tool for navigating relationships. It creates language for what motivates us and helps us look at the way we look at everything else. Most importantly, the Enneagram's a mirror because sometimes you need help seeing yourself. My name is Jeff Cook. I'm a philosopher in Greeley, Colorado. With me is TJ Wilson, businessman, lover of theology, and Enneagram ninja.
Hello.
Boss.
Hey.
It feels like this is part two, and oftentimes part two comes just right after part one. But
Right.
The last time you and I recorded was like a month ago.
I know, right?
So it may feel like it's back to back, but...
Sure. How's touring New England?
So TJ, you will know that I'm a lifelong baseball fan.
Yes, I do know that.
You will also know that my kids and wife don't really care about baseball.
I also know that, yeah.
We went to a Red Sox game at the Fenway Park.
Mm-hmm.
It was nearly sold out. I was shocked because I'm used to going to Coors Field, which is normally half full on a good day.
Right, yeah.
Well, my wife and youngest got $9 tickets in the student section.
Perfect.
They're surrounded by yahoos. I got the ticket at the door for $50. I was right next to first base.
Nice.
And they had the experience.
Oh, sure, yeah.
They had the mystical baseball experience
Mm-hmm.
that you have to have in order to actually get drawn in.
Sure.
And they walked out. We met up. They bought a jersey. They bought a hat. They were all in on. So I was happy to convert with them. They converted into baseball fans. I converted into being a Red Sox fan. I grew up as a Yankees fan and then transitioned once the Colorado team popped in.
Sure.
We haven't done anything for 16 years. So Rockies, I'm sorry you lost me. It's been 16
right.
years since you cared. And so I'm going to go hang with the Irish drunken idiots that were...
Hey, that's my people.
Oh, me and the Gingers.
Your wife sent me a photo from that game,
Oh, yeah?
and I immediately got bored.
TJ, I love the hell out of our last episode. I'm not going to lie. There are very few times that I'm impressed by your work that I come tag along for, but that episode that you did last time, it was fantastic.
Hey, we were both on that episode.
So dear listener, we have about 5,000 people that listen. 2,000 ducked out as we've done this Instincts podcast because we warned them, hey, you need 5 years. So I was like, people actually listen to us. I hope they come back. But yeah, before we jump into Instincts again, the one rule is, you should probably do the other Enneagram work for about 5 years till you get into this stuff.
Yeah.
Because this stuff is going to get messy.
Yeah, we recently had I'm telling your story. We recently had a group discussion about this topic, and like some of the realities of getting this deep mean you get into some territory where it starts to look like other stuff. Like you behave this way in these situations and this way in these situations, and like it just it's just messy. There's a lot going on with these instincts.
So we're talking about the self-preservation instinct. Do listen, obviously, to part one of this, but just to build on what we did there, we think that your dominant instincts or the instincts are more like gears in a car that you shift into in your life to get you where you need to go. We all have different circumstances at hand. We all shift in different ways to navigate the world in terms of getting our motive. Our motive is the target. Our motive tells us where we're going. When you arrive in your car, that your motive is targeting that. But how you drive, how the car is constructed, really matters as well. Yeah. Instincts, it's essentially like gears. You're putting it into second gear because this is the best way for you to get from here to there. And for many of us, we get really comfortable in what we call our dominant instinct. But all of us have access to all of the instincts in the. So before I go into all the instincts, anything we're saying on that metaphor?
Yeah, just we feel and use them in throughout our lives, and because these are instincts about survival, the survival of the self, the survival of the group, the survival of the species. Like that. This is about how we keep going, how we keep living, and we learn how to sort of flex these muscles. We learn how to use these gears in the different spaces in our lives, and I'll come back to this over and over again. This is my common refrain in this. It is not the case that that everyone who is dominant with self-preservation. It is not the case that everyone who is dominant with self-preservation is a loner. It's not the case that everyone who's dominant with social wants to be at parties all the time. Like, these gears come out how we've decided to use them, and we'll get to see a lot of that play out.
Bang. Yeah, building on this, the instincts are primarily about our social energy, how I engage the group, how I engage another, and how I engage myself. Self-preservation is primarily about how I engage myself, protect myself, think about myself, consider myself, my energies, my resources first. If it's a dominant instinct, I'm going here first. Yeah. But sometimes we go here because we need to think about ourselves. So everybody has access to self-preservation. And as we go around the circle, this is what it looks like for your type to go to self-preservation.
Yep.
Well, let's talk about 5s then.
Great.
The thing about 5s, and we've already talked about 9s and 4s, is that they are a withdrawn type. Mm-hmm. And self-preservation and withdrawing can look similar.
Yeah.
But there's really important things that need to be distinguished here. And so for our purposes throughout, as we're talking about all the types in self-preservation, what TJ and I have tried to do is put together a list that makes a distinction between being withdrawn in your stance and getting what you want by taking a step back, and a very different thing, which is the self-preservation instinct. So just to play this out real quick, self-preservation instinct is about creating boundaries. It often is highly focused on your home and nesting. It's often very focused on physical and emotional regulation. It often is very focused on independence. You will notice the withdrawn types, 4s, 5s, 9s, aren't always independent.
Right.
But if you're self-pres, if you are exercising your self-preservation muscles, independence comes first. Mm-hmm. And so that can look like escaping. It can look like preparation. It can especially look like turning inward and doing the work of the soul. Self-preservation is about being risk averse. 4s, 5s, 9s can all have a healthy measure of risk. Right. But in terms of getting into self-preservation, risk aversedness arises. And so that means minimizing discomfort. That can mean avoidance of certain types of people. And lastly, self-preservation is about assets. And that can be financial, that can be tools, that can be social alliances and networks that you are invested in. All of these make a clear distinction between the withdrawn stance and the self-preservation instinct. Any thoughts on that?
Yeah, I think we're going to see that, as particularly that part about assets, a lot in all 4 of these types today. Because when we're thinking about 5s, we start with the head triad, the fear triad, the data-driven triad. 5, 6s, and 7s. Mm-hmm. All have that as part of their normal filter anyway. This is sort of like the first filter. And this means that they're future planners. They're concerned about safety and security and preparation, and highly in tune with their resources. Mm-hmm. So all 3, 5, 6, and 7s are part of that. 8s dip their toe in that as well. We'll talk about that when we get there. But when we specifically looking at 5s, there's sort of this idea of withdrawal being part of it. They're also like, it's almost like they're pushing farther into some of those aspects, but it's for the preservation. It's not necessarily in order to get what they want. It's to make sure they stay alive.
I feel like when I think about fives, my assumption is that their social energy is going to be more self-preservationist. But the two fives that I'm closest to are not dominant here.
Right.
My child really uses this gear only when they come home and go downstairs. And they enter their sanctuary. They enter their bedroom that they have clearly kind of outlined. This is my stuff and the stuff that makes me feel comfortable. The stuff that, like, there's a lot of recovery that takes place in their bedroom. And a lot of that centers on video games. They have a very large bed. They inherited a mattress that was mine, but it's just this enormous king size mattress, but like it fills up their space. And and even the turning inward, I think, comes across for them in that space. But they're not dominant here, but they do use this gear. And they use it when it's time to kind of recover some of the energy.
Right. This is fives who have a natural hyper awareness of their limited amount of energy. Like we talk about the bucket. When the bucket depletes, it's empty and they leave. And fives who find themselves in this self-preservation space, like that bucket moves to the forefront of the mind. Like it is so much more. They are so much more aware of their energy, the what they have to give to other people, and what they are intentionally keeping private. Like we talked about boundaries. This is a big place where boundaries come in, is that they need to have their own private space, because that is the only place where they know for sure they are safe.
Sometimes, just to put a footnote on it, sometimes that's not physical. Sometimes that's a mental checkout, and they go mentally into a space that they've created, and just you don't see them much.
Right.
Because they're in their head.
Right.
They're quote unquote in their head.
Yeah. Chestnut in her book, she calls this castle.
Yeah.
And I think of, like, a castle is protected from the outside world by a moat and a drawbridge and alligators and a great big wall and guards. And I also think of mind palaces, which is a memory technique. But it's also like, I know some fives who can sit and just think for a very long time, because there's a lot of space in their own mind palace.
Right.
Like they have a reading nook set up because they have the ability to withdraw, if you will, into this space where they are separated. They are boundaried from everyone else because they're inside their own head, and that's they have complete control and autonomy in that space, and like this is safe from the outside world. And when people interrupt that space, then the shackles can come up. Like that's one place where they get a little irritated with other people, is when someone tries to interrupt that space for them.
Right. All the types can have the self-pres spiritual practices that they may employ that are more retreat looking. But when I think of these things, like nines and fives seem to embrace them very cleanly, quickly. And it's almost like, here's part of my identity. So I know so many nines who just love the outdoors.
Yeah.
And like that's the retreat is I go into spaces where there's no chaos.
Yeah.
And everything's fairly harmonious. Similar move for the five in terms of I go into the space where, here things there's solitude. No one's expecting anything from me. I can be in an atmosphere where my mind can be pleasantly enjoying my observations, and it's not it's not the static. It's not a lot of times fives' minds can move so quickly through things that make them feel uncomfortable. Yeah, you can't escape your negative meditations sometimes as a five,
right? But
getting into the outdoors, that can be one of those places. I know some fives that are like, this is how I get out of the negativity in my brain.
Right. That withdrawal, that sort of step back, that is more about self-preservation than it is about stance, is because fives are so aware of their energy, the mental resources that they have to interact with the outside world, they have to find places where that energy, where they have more control over that energy than the outside world does.
Yep.
And sometimes that is an internal retreat. Sometimes it's going into your bedroom in your basement where you're sort of blocked off from the rest of your family. Sometimes it's escaping the city and being out. For some fives, it may be walking around the city, like New York City, walking around by themselves and just sort of like being in the city. There can be a level of comfort within that, but there's still a retreat because in moving around that space, they're still guarded from having to give more than they want to.
I think that's exactly right. And actually, a lot of us, just having left New York City, when you're in New York, oftentimes you can just kind of create a little mental bubble around yourself.
Mm-hmm.
It's like there's so many people that it's actually easier to isolate.
Right. Right.
I want to talk about the independence side here. One place that fives can really be independent is in their work. The image that self-preservation may mean that I'm working a lot as an escape, as a way of gaining, well, as you kind of said, like the castle walls go up.
Mm-hmm.
If I have oftentimes many types will choose jobs intentionally that are isolating.
Right.
You know, that this is my space, I carve it out. Just being able to tell your spouse and kids, hey, I would love to do that, but I'm at work.
Mm-hmm.
That's a move. You know, it's a self-preservation move.
Right.
I don't want to give energy to other things because oftentimes we all know this. Well, many of us know this, especially if you like your job. Oftentimes work is a whole lot more enjoyable than some of your duties, responsibilities, and, you know, the social necessities of life.
Right. Right. Well, and for a lot of fives, like that work is feeding into a resource.
Mm-hmm.
So there's research, there's knowledge gained, there's something about having and using a particular kind of information that is life-giving for fives. Yep. And as types who are naturally trying to be observers of the world and not part of it, that being isolated in work can sometimes be a necessity because not only are you trying to keep your influence out of the data, but also you have to keep everyone else's influence out of the data. Mm-hmm. And the only way to do that is to work alone, right? Mm-hmm. Thinking about information as a resource, like this is another thing that they are very protective of.
Yeah. No, if you're in the head triad, you're thinking about what might happen. And if you find a lot of value in your work as something that's going to protect you from your future fears, mm-hmm. the preparation side comes in with self-preservation. You know, preparation is a huge element in self-preservation, and that would be a real sweet spot there for a five who wants to say, well, no, but I need to prepare for these things.
Right.
And, you know, the byproduct, the fruit of that is you're isolating.
And there's I think a big part of combining this self-preservation with the sort of natural draw to a withdrawing kind of stance, there's a level of secrecy and privacy needed here that is like your information is a resource, mm-hmm. and you need to keep this space blocked off because not only are they withdrawing as a stance, but also like wanting to self-preserve. You need to keep your resources safe for whatever future thing you might be worried about.
Yeah.
There's and it gets interesting here. I think there are other types who, when gathering resources, they are looking at a sort of set safety net, right? Mm-hmm. Like this is the thing that I need is the safety net. But fives who are constantly reevaluating their resources need a safety net, and they don't necessarily have like a fixed number. They just want to make sure that that safety net is going to be there, and that also means that they can continue to acquire more and more safety net.
Yeah.
We talk about the passion, the struggle of greed or avarice with fives. And this is one of the places where it can come in. They keep all of that to themselves in order to protect it from the outside world. And then when you really add in this self-preservation instinct, now that thing that they're keeping, that safety net, is not just a safety net, but it's something that they must have to ensure that they keep moving forward.
Right.
This is a necessity for the preservation of life.
What I hear here, and this isn't necessarily negative, but I hear the opportunity for a lot of excuses being made for the five to those that they love. This is why I'm isolating.
Yep.
And it's justifying, a very independent posture toward the people in your life, as it were. This work is meaningful. This work is going to keep us safe. This work is, et cetera. But all of the types need to be aware of the low side of their instincts, and there really are some pitfalls for self-pres instincts in terms of, as we talked about last time, the self-centeredness that can either be intentional or unintentional.
Right. Yeah.
Because just to move into risk avoidance, people are messy, and relationships are risky. They're not always comfortable, and so that aversion and desiring comfort that can come in for the five as well.
Right.
I suppose we said this with nines. There is something worth on, since we're talking about negatives. There is something to be talked about in terms of chemical abuse by both nines and fives, in particular, in my head.
Sure.
In terms of the ways that alcohol and narcotics might be utilized if you're in a self-preservation space.
Yeah.
And you're a 9 or a 5.
Yeah. Well, and especially if you're, more unhealthy with your substance use, it can become habitual to the point of being part of what keeps you safe.
Yeah.
Because you don't know what's on the other side of that.
Last thing I had in this, I think we see this on a lot of fives, is just their reluctance to hear the wisdom of external sources that aren't just like sheer data.
Sure.
Fives often know everything,
Right. The word that I wrote down, the phrase that I wrote down, which is the exact same thought, is intellectual authority.
A rejection of that.
Particularly self-preservation leaning fives may have a really hard time with their doctors, because if you probe just a little bit, it's pretty easy to find out that you're smarter than your doctor.
Right.
And I don't mean that as a slight to doctors. I mean that as this is the reality of a lot of fives living in this world, is that they, whether true or not, they believe that they are authorities on the subjects that they've looked into.
Right.
And if they've looked into the medical field in which they're trying to experience, if they've looked into the thing that they have and they go to their doctor, there's a reasonable chance that they have more fresh information about the thing that they're talking about than their doctor does. And now their doctor has lost all intellectual authority, and there's a boundary up.
Yep. Two things go through my mind there. One is the coping style for fives is that they solve problems with data, and what counts as evidence is going to be up to the five.
Right.
The other thing that goes off through my head, and I think this is a little bit more core, is that I think fives want to be self-sufficient, and that's what's going on there.
Yeah.
The real desire for self-sufficiency, especially I'm going to live this out, think through this, get to the places that make me feel comfortable intellectually first. And so I don't need your advice. Just kind of naturally flows out of that.
Yeah. Well, and I would take that even a step further, and the preservation of the self for a type that is prone to a bit of isolation anyway may come with a pretty significant amount of limiting their own wants and needs. If I don't need anything, then I don't ever have to rely on anyone.
Yep.
If I can take care of my own stuff, then I don't ever have to go to a doctor who knows less than I do anyway.
I suppose on the flip side, Fives generally can have a real difficult time getting into their body, caring about their body.
Mm-hmm.
I imagine the self-preservation instinct might be helpful there.
Could be.
Like you may. I don't think this is required, but it may be the case that you think through, your nutrition, your health, and the sort of activities. It may be the case that exercise, being spurred to exercise, actually comes out of a self-preserving place.
Sure. And at the same time, there is this tremendous tension to be managed that limits the amount of energy that a 5 could spend on this.
And that would be the flip side, yeah.
Yeah. Preservation of the energy might mean that you skip the things that are necessary to take care of your body.
Take way too much energy and time.
Right.
What, to prepare a salad?
Yeah, I mean, eating healthy just takes so much time and energy and money, and it's just easier to eat crappy. And you know how your body responds to that, so you can manage your own resources based on your own personal experience.
Might have some data to back up your bad habits too.
Mm-hmm.
It's like
That's a thing.
I'd say we're saying this on the negative. There clearly are real positives for 5s in self-preservation space. For me, some of the things that I'm most envious of that 5s seem to have on this front is the ability to say, here are my friends and here are people that are acquaintances but do not deserve my energy.
Yeah.
As it were. There seems to be a real investment that can take place. And even 5s of this may be sexual 5 tendency more that they will allow themselves to go deeper with those relationships. But on the self-preservation side, at least creating the boundaries, that can be very, very helpful.
Yeah. You are not alone. There are a lot of people in the world, and several of the other types in particular, who really struggle with not giving good energy to bad sources,
right,
or bad recipients. Self-preservation means that you don't give your energy to things that don't keep you alive. And 5s in particular, this is a place where they have no qualms drawing lines there.
The other big benefit can be if you're in a society that's very healthy, or if you're in a business that's already very healthy, having very conservative people, and I say that not politically, but having people who just are pretty risk averse and just will say, we don't need to change anything right now.
Right.
Our company is beautiful. Our country is beautiful. We are allocating our assets in very healthy, wise ways that will produce over time that we just don't need to risk. Like, having those people can be really a treasure if you're in a spot that's good, as it were.
Right. Well, and when it's a 5, you know that they have the data to back that up.
Yeah.
When it's a 9 saying we don't have to change anything, there's a good chance that 9 just doesn't want to do any of the work. It's not about whether the change would be good or not. It's that the work sucks.
Yeah.
With a 5, there is a much better chance of a 5 having good reasons and being able to lay out those reasons in a way that makes sense.
Here's the future threats. Here's the assets that we have. Yeah. We ought to play it conservatively because that's our best play for the long term.
Right.
For the long haul.
Right.
If it were the case that their fear spiked, that 5 is going to go into 7 space and probably get some energy up and say, no, we probably need to move. That's one of the great things about being a 5 in these spaces is, if your fear isn't surging, you're pretty much a grounding presence on these fronts.
Right.
Anyway, positives for the self-pres instinct in 5s. Anything else for 5s?
Oh, I'm sure there's lots more we could say, but we don't know any of it because particularly self-preservation 5s don't share it with the world.
If you guys were more open, we would be able to talk more. Actually, we spent a lot of time on 5s. 6s. 6s that push into the self-preservation instinct. Hey, TJ.
Yeah.
You married to one of these?
Dude, when I was listening to the the episode of Art of Growth that was the Self-Preservation 6 panel, I laughed so hard so often because these people were saying out loud things that me and my wife have talked about, and it's just amazing.
Wonderful.
I live with a Self-Preservation Dominant 6, and it's great.
Well, I could throw out some thoughts, but I assume you're an expert here, so go to it. What do you see?
Yeah. So here we are in the center of the head triad, the fear triad, the future planning triad, and we find ourselves with the fear type of that triad. So this is a traditional teaching of how the Enneagram presents sixes. They're fear-based. They're the fear in the fear triad, and they're the fear type. I like doubt a lot more. Doubt is a much more interesting word for these people. And when we talk about self-preservation in the six, this is one of the spaces where that doubt is loudest and largest. And you see it playing out in all of their interactions with other people, in their frustration with their own space, in the way that they manage their resources. Doubt is the thing that drives most of their decisions because they need to be prepared, but they do not trust themselves and they do not trust anything around them to ensure that preparation, to ensure that safety and security. So they're moving toward that, like doing the things that are needed to gain that preparation, to gain that security.
I want to start off with a compliment for sixes in this space. Oftentimes, the people I'm intimidated by most are this person who seems like they have their emotions regulated. They are put together. They are putting forward an appearance of stability, and they have very clear boundaries, which they will be happy to communicate to you about where they feel comfortable. And that person is always really intimidating to me. And I'm sure it's the case on the flip side, as you were saying, the anxiety is buzzing in their head. But I don't see that.
Yeah, the thing that every single one of those people says to the people that are closest to them is, if only everyone knew.
Yes, exactly right. There's an inner reality that isn't showcased.
Because part of the security is in maintaining an appearance of someone who is secure.
Yeah.
Goes
toward one of the tools for sixes in this space is social alliances. And so you need to come across as competent, cool, not somebody who's going to get kicked off the island, and like this sort of six seems to me, and again, a place I'm kind of envious, just navigate social settings with a ton of class. Because so much of their energy is poured into that. As a tool.
Well, and it's almost like for a lot of these types, the social space that they occupy is a big part of their protection. The team will protect me because I'm part of the team.
And then they really work to ground themselves.
Right. And I would also say that team is usually a small group.
Sure.
So like my wife is a teacher at a high school, a public high school. Her self-preservation means that as much as she is part of the 90-person faculty, she is actually part of the art department.
Sure.
And there's 4 of them. And that team is one of the most important things about her job. Because as part of that group, she is like that is her safety, that is her security, that is like knowing that she is a good teacher, knowing that she has a job that maintains in perpetuity, that she will keep working and building on this department and this program. That team has to be solid.
Yeah. Love that. I imagine beyond the team, she's very aware of who her boss is. And very aware of the investments that she's making in order to showcase herself as indispensable.
Yep.
At some levels.
Yeah.
and even aware of what that might look like. How does she need to earn
Mm-hmm.
her boss's affections at that level?
Yeah, we talk about the devil's advocate side of sixes, and sixes in self-preservation space are much less likely to push against authority.
Yeah, there you go.
It does not mean that they automatically trust all authority. It's just they're not necessarily going to be the one that speaks up in the staff meeting. You
Right.
know, they are less likely to trust that authority and put more energy into the smaller group that they're a part of.
This is really one of the downsides for sixes in my mind, and this is probably something I'm averse to, but it seems like if the bullies of the world, who are looking for people to take advantage of, like sixes can be natural targets for this person. And if you can, and here's the move. If it's the case that the instincts are not part of your type, it's not a subtype. If it's an instinct that emerges for the type, then sometimes sixes, whoever you are, can get beaten into a spot where they're self-preserving. And once you hit self-preserving, then you become easier to control and manipulate.
Right.
And a lot of sixes in the world can do things that they normally would not do.
Right.
Except for, the bully has pushed them into that space.
And there's a sense of almost like childlikeness.
Yeah.
That comes out in the self-preservation space, and it's not childish. It's presenting yourself as someone who needs to be protected. It's and not even necessarily like being being outwardly vulnerable, but in being around in a way that endears people to like obviously I want to protect this thing, like this person is close to me in a way that like I want to make sure that they are safe, and this is how like this shows up in a lot of self-preservation sixness.
Love that.
And it's as you were saying, on the flip side of that, it is most easy to take advantage of children.
Right.
Right.
Yeah. And that's compounded some with, doubting your own mental life and intuitions. Obviously, some of the struggles that sixes will have. This is where, I suppose, to fight against this, the independence that comes with self-preservation may be a real resource for some sixes in this space. If you're in this space, what does this look like? Preparation's gonna, I imagine, be a huge part of this six's inventory. Financial planning, home management. I have stored 144 cans of chicken soup in the basement alongside a tub of water. There's all the what might go wrong. The six is gonna shift into, well, here's self-preservation, and it's the independence side, I suppose, is what's going on in my head.
Yeah.
If they shift into that space and get independent, then it's going to be, well, I need to make sure that I have the resources to ensure that I feel safe. And so what is it that I need to stock up on?
Right. And I don't think that's necessarily like prepper level. Like I'm sure there are a lot of self-preservation sixes that are, at least dip their toe in prepper-ing. But
I could see male sixes in particular.
Sure.
Going down that road.
Yeah. But I also think that having the things for which you have already planned. Like this is something I never learned meal prep. Like that's just not a thing that has existed in my brain ever.
Sure.
But my wife has been making a weekly meal plan for like 30 years. Like she is very concerned about making sure that we at least have a plan for every meal for the week. And we have all of the things that we need in order to go along with that plan. That doesn't necessarily mean that's what we're going to do on Wednesday afternoon and on Friday evening, but we have the food that was planned for those days.
Right.
Like there's the preparedness, the independence in that space means that the six has all of the pieces needed for the plan.
Right.
They won't need to go to the store to have someone else like to go borrow a cup of sugar or like find the thing that is missing from the recipe. They have all of that prepared because this is part of making sure that they stay alive.
Yep.
Is sticking to the plan.
Yep. When that transitioning to the work as escape side of things, this may not be an escape, but it certainly can be a self-preserving move to earn the security that you need as a 6. And so I'm gonna exhaust myself at work in order to ensure that I've earned everything I need to feel good, feel secure in the world.
Right.
It seems to me to be one of the things that may materialize in this type.
Yeah. And if anyone ever comes and checks on me,
Yep.
I need to be able to show them that I check all the boxes.
Yeah. Right.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah. It's practicality. Like everything that there's not a lot of sort of like abstract trying new things. There's not a lot we're going to talk about risk soon, but like there's not a lot of branching out into new territory when the self-preservation instinct is in place, because all of those things you can't be prepared for something new.
Right. What I hear there is your orientation to time is very present. What do I need to do now? And for the 6, it's going to be, well, I need to follow the rules. I need to do my job.
I need to check all the
I
boxes.
need to check all the boxes. Yeah. And you beat me to it. But the thing that screams off the list for me is risk aversedness. And so like if you're anxious and, the risk aversedness may come out for the self-pres 6 in a way where they are screaming about future threats. And so like we don't want to roll the dice because X, Y, and Z might happen.
Right. And for a lot of self-preservation 6s, there's...
Screaming's not the right word there.
But it's like, it's even an acknowledgement that like we're too far into this already. And then some of the overthinking and the unproductive thinking come in, and also like the...
What you need is strategic planning from this person.
Right.
You need, again, we've already talked about preparedness, but that's where they may actually, the 6 really shifting in self-preservation mode may say, let's do some, I would love to help with the strategic planning about all the future problems that our family, our company, our government, that we're addressing.
Right.
Am I wrong there? That feels right to me, especially if you say that, like, because that's the cool side of this type in my mind, who look like they have it all together, and then they say, you know what, we really do need to have a meeting of the heads to address these problems in the next 2 to 3 years, and like I'll hear that person go, yeah, dude, you're exactly right. We probably should be thinking about that.
Well, but I think that the context is really important there, because if they don't feel safe to stick their neck out and say that we need to make these plans, then they won't.
Sure.
But they will spin out about it.
Okay. Yeah. Well, I suppose I'm thinking of like the guy who works at the CIA.
Sure.
Who is a self-pres 6, who may be really great on these fronts. Like, a terrorist event's going to happen in the next 3 years. So let's, and they perhaps feel comfortable enough and perhaps have been validated in their job to say, hey, Charlie, what do you think we should do? Let's get,
Sure.
They're not going to lead that meeting probably, I assume.
Yeah. Oh yeah, no way. They don't want to lead that.
But they may be a voice of concern behind the scenes.
And I'm thinking about, like, so the person at the CIA who's self-preservation dominant, and they're a 6, and they are concerned about this terrorist attack, but let's say the new CIA director is in their job because they're cousins with the boss, and their previous employment experience was managing a bowling alley, right?
Yep.
That person is not even a little bit trustworthy, and the self-preservation 6 is not going to put themselves in the crosshairs of someone who doesn't know how to do their job.
Yeah, correct. I think think my head was going towards what does it look like for a 6 pushing into self-preservation who's just really great and comfortable in their vocation.
Yeah.
The strategic planning, I suppose, was what came to my mind. I may be wrong on that.
I mean, well, the strategic planning is important, and I think it is so much more about the 6, like in the self-preservation space. It's so much more about the 6's personal livelihood, than it necessarily is about the bigger stuff.
I suppose jumping to the end here, it seems like no type experiences the need for social alliances in the same way that 6s in self-preservation would. Social alliances are going to be almost everything to a 6 who pushes into self-preservation.
Right.
And so
and yeah, a big part of that is because the self-doubt is so big in this space that you have to have other people that help you navigate all of those spaces where you can't effectively engage because you don't trust yourself.
Right. So I suppose I'm talking through this behavior-wise, 6s who are moving towards self-preservation, that could probably come out in all kinds of different ways.
Yeah. Yes.
But the motive, I suppose, and the influence of the instinct is what I'm trying to showcase in terms of examples. So, but perhaps it's just really worth naming that the social alliances are going to be huge for 6s in this space.
Yeah.
Because feeling insecure, they're going to move into, okay, who can I connect to?
Right.
Who's strong?
Yeah. For the last, my wife and I have been married for almost 9 years. We've been together for like 15 or something. And from the minute we got married, we combined all of our bank accounts, and like we're fully committed 100%. We're on legal paper, we're basically one person now. And I am the one who manages the budget because she either obsesses about it or hands it off to someone else. So she can't.
I love that.
Yeah. So thinking about like resources and risk aversion and asset management, she can't handle the stress of ensuring that you have the right financial situation is so much for her that she can't do that and also live her normal life.
Right. She'll be really great at naming the potential problems, but not trust herself with the solution.
Correct.
So if you listen to her as a capable person and say, look, I heard your concerns and I got this, that will be enough.
Yeah. But it's not enough 100% of the time, and it's taken 15 years to get to where we're at, like 80%.
Sure. Bang. That's what I got for 6s. You got anything else?
I don't think there's anything else I needed to cover.
Yeah, that one I think is very helpful. 7s. The self-pres 7 is an interesting type.
I am so excited to talk about the self-pres 7.
Yeah. And see, okay. So for the sake of full disclosure, you'll notice how I keep, falling back into language of other folks who elevate theories that we're not elevating. So
yeah, we're both doing that a little bit.
I need a better phrase than 7s employing their self-pres instinct. Self-pres 7 is just quicker. And
sure. Yeah.
So
yeah. I feel like we've laid the groundwork so that people know what we're talking about when we're talking about it, right?
7s moving into self-preservation space end up being, well, I mean, do you got thoughts? What comes to your mind first here?
So we talk about, we're still in that head triad. Fear is a big thing. Resource management is a big thing for all 3 of these types. And we talk about 7s being avoiders of pain and negativity, and ensuring that they have opportunity, They are looking to make sure they are never stuck. 7s who are self-preservation types can sometimes look a bit more selfish in and amongst all of that. Whereas I think 7s who lean more on social or the sexual bonding instinct, they don't look as selfish. They're much more sort of life of the party.
Yeah.
But when 7s are sort of dominant in this self-preservation, when they're in this self-preservation space, they are concerned about making sure that their experiences are as enjoyable as possible.
Yeah. I was going to build on that. What I see here is that there's probably a scarcity mindset that 7s naturally have, but in self-preservation, that sucker is going to get amplified.
Yeah. Yeah. And like the idea of, like, we've all seen movies and tropes and read books about the type of people who are insistent that like every moment is a moment to be lived.
Yeah.
A lot of those people saying those words might have been self-preservation 7s.
Sure. Yeah, the self-focus there comes into play. The adventure becomes about my adventure as opposed to our adventure, which is...
Right.
The 7 will commonly connect to others by pulling them into the adventure. But in self-preservation space, it's my adventure.
Right. And you're welcome, but I'm going to ensure that I have the things that I want.
That 7 on the boundary side, it may not be a boundary, but the appearance versus reality that we were talking about with 6s here feels like it's the same with 7s. Like they may appear as though, you know, you're the most interesting person in the world. You're going all these different places by yourself. You know, you are James Bond just conquering everything. And inwardly, it is scarcity and fear and I must move or else.
Right. Yeah, thinking about that, like that sort of scarcity mindset being prevalent here, like I'm sure most of them wouldn't say it, but a lot of them might resonate with the idea that we could all die tomorrow, and so I don't want to spend any of my resources to have something that's not enjoyable. If we're going to spend resources on this, it better be worth it.
Right. Yeah, right.
And that applies to their inner life as well, but they don't, because that fear and that scarcity mindset, the things that are going on inside are sort of like pushing them in that direction, that their internal life is being sort of separated, because that, like, this is a big place where a lot of the like avoidance of pain and emotional issues, we don't have time to be that unhappy. I don't want to risk being unhappy on my last day on earth. I don't want to like if I can't ever get this time back, I want it to be good. And so pushing away, ignoring, not dealing with the negative side of emotions and inner life, like that comes out in this self-preservation space.
My favorite observation here is the move towards independence that happens with 7s here, especially when it comes to health and wellness. Because often these sorts of 7s are the ones who have crazy ideas about how to keep their body healthy, right? I'm going through this mango therapy right now, getting injections every other week, and I feel fantastic. It's the sort of thing that I can hear. There is some sort. Now some things get discovered along the path where you're like, yoga really works, but you know that it was like a 7 is discovering sweaty yoga. Like what if we turned the temperature up to 120 and pumped in some humidity here?
Well, and like one of the notes I wrote down was almost like there's a lot more sort of throwing spaghetti at the wall, but it's not that. It is like coming back to that resource management and insisting on everything being an enjoyable experience. Like Like their concern about their body, their health, their wellness, all of that is in order to feed the potential future that they might have.
Right. Yeah.
So
right.
all health and wellness practices have to be interesting first.
So I had a buddy in high school. I have no idea why he invited me to him getting an ear candle, but like I'm sitting in this dark room with meditative music and him on his side. Do you know what an ear candle is?
I do.
Like it's the most like, again, kind of holistic health practice. You stick this like wax funnel into your ear, you light it, and it pulls all the crap out of your ear into this ear candle, and like that sort of thing. I'm thinking back. He got really jazzed about this, and and I can see sevens in my life who, again, when the special diet comes up or here's the supplements, have you heard of the Enneagram is something I can hear coming out of the mouth of a 7.
Yeah. And it's because it's something new, it's exciting, it's like whatever self-growth they might be aiming for, they want it to be an interesting experience in the first place.
Yeah. They're the first ones to sign up for acupuncture.
Right.
Like, we're going to put 300 needles into your back. It's going to make you feel amazing. Okay. Yeah.
Needles in your face, pleasure in your base. There's something about trying the new things. There's something about branching away from the super boring, like I go to the doctor and I check in and they take my weight and they take my blood pressure and then they hit my knee with a little hammer. Like all of that is very boring.
That's it.
And yeah, why not try something different? Branch out a little bit.
On another note, we have talked about this recently. I think that 7, like Jesus, is really embracing that turn inward in really healthy ways. And I think that's a self-preservation move. So the inner life of Jesus, in terms of the spirituality that Jesus often communicates, has a huge self-preserving element. When you pray alone. When you fast, don't tell anybody. When you give, don't tell anybody. All of that is about you, independent, your insides. And that can be really healthy.
And it's also like there is a fair amount of levity in that particular that branch of message, like that way of thinking about the inner life. There is a levity to simplifying and like when you pray alone. This way you don't ever have to perform. You don't ever have to meet anyone else's expectations.
Yeah.
Your own inner life can be your own thing.
That's exactly right. Charm and levity.
Yeah.
Pitched. It's a hard sell, but spun with a lot of joy, and here's a place you can jump.
Right.
Love that. I do see a lot of 7s who are gonna use work as an escape.
Sure.
We have a buddy who, like, his job is literally an hour and a half away from his house. And I think that might be intentional. It's wants to perhaps leave this environment at times and really invest over here. But what that is, I mean, there can be a running away to the workplace for the sake of self-preservation.
Especially if your home life is chaos, is something that you don't have control over, is like, I don't like things being sticky, and I'm really not looking forward to that phase of my child growing up.
Yeah.
Like that point where everything just gets a little sticky for a few years. I'm not looking forward to that. And going to work is an escape for that.
Yep.
Right? Because I get to control whether or not things are sticky at work. And there's an element of being able to, especially in some type of career that offers you the flexibility to be able to explore your own fancies, there's an element of escape, of opportunity that is afforded to you when you leave the place where you aren't in control and go to the place where you are in control.
Yep. You know, another place you're in control is in the future.
Yeah.
Especially if you are the planner, the goal setter, the one who naturally has long-term vision.
Mm-hmm.
That's a place that you can go into your, what did you call it? The mental box? The
mind palace. Yeah.
I mean, I could see 7s living in that space.
And with this self-preservation instinct feeding it, I think there's also a level of preparedness that can come into that. So there are a lot of 7s who are a little bit more austere in their stuff. And there are some 7s who have everything that they might need for any type of thing that they might want to do. There are 7s who don't have a lot of food in their refrigerator because they're on to the next event. And there are some 7s who have a packed pantry because they want to make sure that they have everything that they might need in order to accomplish in order to have the meal that they were planning. Like, it's similar to the 6s, but 7s are also much more likely to abandon that plan once they get there.
Right.
They just want to make sure that they have everything they need for the plan.
Yeah, because part of living well is going to be being comfortable.
Mm-hmm.
This is going to be the interesting side to 7s is when we start talking about risk adversedness. It seems like 7s would naturally be the most naturally risky of the types.
Sure.
Enneagram types.
Yeah.
But in self-preservation space, that's not going to be, it's going to be balanced in self-preservation space.
Yeah. And I think that they are, they represent this really fun, I will not take risks until I do.
Mm-hmm.
There was one. This was a really interesting thing that stood out to me in some of the interviews that we listened to from Art of Growth. Is that there was one 7 in particular who said, "I'm an entrepreneur. I started a business and I made a lot of money, and I kept that money because it was good and important to have. And then I started another business and I lost all of it."
Right.
And he did not say that in a way that was depressed about it, because the opportunity to start those businesses is the thing that he wanted.
Mm-hmm.
The money was not necessarily the resource that he was protecting. It was his opportunity to continue starting businesses that was his resource.
The thing that's coming to my mind, and I don't have anyone in particular in mind, but there are the 7s who might get outrageous with how they dress.
Mm-hmm.
There's a comfort there that isn't very quote unquote risky. In my mind, risk is actually blowing lots of money or the vacation or, or especially the entrepreneurial investment.
Sure.
Whereas being self-preserving as a 7, what does it look like for me to not risk and yet still fulfill that adventurous side? It might just have to do with smaller things like here's how I dress, here's how I eat. Really maximizing comfort is what I'm trying to drive toward.
Yeah. Yeah. I think that's like the risk aversion is more self-focused than it is on the outside world risks. Like Adam Sandler famously dresses how he wants all the time.
Sure.
Like if you ever see Adam Sandler in public, there's a very good chance he'll be wearing basketball shorts and some type of jersey.
Yeah.
And that's him. That's how he does it, period. And that's because he doesn't care. He wants to be comfortable in his clothes more than he wants you to think that he's a good dresser.
Mm-hmm.
The risk that he is avoiding is his own personal comfort.
Oh, sure. I see where you're going.
Yeah. So he'll show up to black tie events dressed like that.
Yeah.
Which is risky, but the bigger risk for him is that he needs to be comfortable in his clothes.
Yeah. Being comfortable, or the flip side, minimizing discomfort. That's a double negative.
That's a better way to say it. Yeah.
But the motive is more there.
Right. He still has to wear clothes.
Yeah.
So like there's still an element of doing something he doesn't necessarily want to do, but yeah, minimizing the risk, minimizing the discomfort.
Another place that doesn't take a lot of risk is the past reframed. And the nostalgia that can come out in some 7s can be severe.
Yeah.
Items that have a lot of sentimentality, being reminded of the story from the past and getting a chance to perform it, engage it, meditate on it.
Yeah.
Those are places that don't take a lot of risk.
Right.
Can be quite enjoyable, move you out of the present.
And a particular note on that this is behavior, memories, things that it's pleasant.
Yeah.
I keep things that remind me of things that I didn't like sometimes, you know? Like I keep mementos because I like mementos and tchotchkes and kitsch. Like I like all of that stuff. And I have stuff that reminds me of unpleasant times in my life because I'm obsessed with nostalgia like that. But 7s probably don't have things that trigger bad memories.
What bad memories?
Exactly. Self-preservation, if the preservation of the self is about having good experiences at all times, then you don't keep things around that remind you of bad experiences.
Yeah, that's exactly it. And even more so, you invest in, collect, keep around you the items that do.
Right. And I'd also say like that includes people.
Yeah. Yeah. And that moves to our next one is the tools and assets that you have. That would be, you're using people, the social alliances that you have come out here.
Yeah.
Go ahead. Sorry.
Yeah. A lot of particularly self-preservation 7s are going to be the I got a guy person.
Yep.
Like I have a guy for that because I found him and I kept him because I know that someday I might want that thing again.
Mm-hmm. The guy isn't getting invited on the adventure. The guy is a resource.
The guy is a resource.
Yeah.
Yeah. If he'd make the adventure more interesting, sure, he might come on the adventure, but that's not the point of it.
Right.
He's the resource.
This can be a real tricky place for 7s and their families.
Mm-hmm.
If 7s are having a hard time with their families, if their family is quote unquote like a source of pain or difficulty, this can be very, very difficult.
Yes.
Self-preservation is probably going to look a whole lot like running away from that atmosphere.
Right.
It's going to look like longer vacations. It's going to look like working at a distance. Self-preservation can be fantastic for all of us. And I think it's going to be the case that maybe 7s have the hardest time reconnecting out of that space.
I mean, because this is not necessarily as callous as it sounds, but if relationships are resources, then they're determined by their usefulness. They're determined by the value for the enjoyment of life
in self-preservation space.
Yeah,
that's why they get reduced to that. Yeah, the non-dramatic event is exactly what you're saying. Like the 3-year-old who is screaming all the time. If the 7 is in self-preserving space, it may be very difficult.
Mm-hmm. And there is not, because of how 7s see the world, there is not automatically a relational connection that matters more than anything else.
Mm-hmm.
There are a lot of people who would look at the type of person who might abandon their 3-year-old and say that person is I'm not advocating for abandoning 3-year-olds, but like the idea that person, the person who runs away from that is evil or selfish. It's not nuanced enough to acknowledge that sometimes relational connection is not natural.
Yeah, right. Yep.
Yeah.
On the flip side, and I really want to balance this observation because 7s can be fantastic in this space, but it takes a ton of character. And it's that some 7s really have that nostalgic bone and their valuing of the family, their valuing of tradition, their valuing of, how things are going to be in 3 years. We are going to have this kind of birthday party and this kind of vacation. And so I'm willing to endure right now and do the hard work that I don't want to do because I have a future vision of where we're going to be. And so this sucks. Let's just all name it. It sucks. And yet in 5 years, we're in Hawaii and I have a Mai Tai and I'm playing with my kids in the ocean or wherever your vision is.
Reframing in real time.
Yes. And and that could be a self-preserving move as well.
Right.
I suppose the last thing I have, it kind of goes alongside your your image of I know a guy, but that is the tools. Like we're kind of landing here with the tools and social alliances, but I can see sevens who just are very aware of, the things that they can quickly employ to get them where they want to be.
Right. Right. Yeah. Everything is a resource, and thinking about self-preservation being the thing that's sort of calling the shots. Time, money, food, people, all of it is resources to either assist or detract from my enjoyment of life.
Spot on.
Yeah.
I suppose it needs to be said, and we probably should say this more frequently, that a lot of the examples that kind of are coming from TJ and I are partially off the cuff. We're not collecting stories. And not all stories, even if you are a 7 who has a self-preservation instinct that's really dominant and you're paired with another, it may materialize in very different ways.
Right.
So, both of us are just trying to expose the overlap of the motive and this instinct and how that may materialize. So hopefully this is hitting some of you where you're at.
Right.
Or helping you care for your spouse a little bit more. Because oftentimes, actually, as I've been thinking through this list, the whole self-preservation list ends up being, these are my friends, my family members, where they are going, not in stress, but when they really need to focus on themselves for a second. And for me, I'm thinking about this, I'm like, well, that's kind of hard on me when people I care about go into that space.
Right.
But it's given me a lot more empathy, talking through, this is how the type works, and this is what the instinct looks like in that type. And so, anyway,
sure,
been helpful for me on that front.
Good.
Last one, unless you got anything else on sevens. You got anything else?
I don't think so.
I didn't realize I had a second page of notes on sevens. Can I say one last thing about sevens going into self-preservation space?
Yeah.
The avoidance of emotional connection is all over this move.
People are resources.
I suppose this builds on the thing that I was just trying to articulate, that it gives me more empathy.
Yeah.
Because I connect in that space most severely. And and I should say it differently. That sort of connection is very important to me. That's what I should say.
Right. And
a lot of times the sevens in my life, when they're in self-preservation space, that's exactly what they avoid.
Right.
Is some of the things that I want most.
Right.
And so I don't know what you do with that aside from name it. That's just how it works.
Yeah.
Emotional
attention and openness and vulnerability and connection. Man, there's so much opportunity for that to go badly.
I suppose it's a risk. Like emotional vulnerability is a risk.
Huge risk.
That's what it is.
Yeah.
And so the self-protective move is not being going emotionally deep. Let's keep it light, moving, fluid. Come on. All right. See, that's helpful.
Right.
8s. Landing with the 8s. 8s in self-preservation space. What do you see?
Well, I have made it a point to bring up that self-preservation does not mean loner, and social instinct does not mean life of the party. And with self-preservation 8s, these are the type that are most likely to live in a cabin in the woods by themselves.
Right. This is the what did you call them? The people who are preparing for the zombie apocalypse.
Yeah, the preppers. Yeah,
preppers.
Yeah, it just when you hear people who experience this talk about it, when you read these stories, when you read theories, like the thing that comes out over, like every single point that's made can have this tone of control.
Right.
Like this more than other 8s who more than 8s when they are in other spaces, when they are in a self-preservation, when that instinct is rearing its head, these 8s are about establishing control over their own life and space.
The fear of being overwhelmed.
Yeah.
Is it's again appearance versus reality. This sort of person may look, again, very spiky, may really come across as strong and in control of their space, and they feel vulnerable.
Yeah.
I think you said that well.
And so they are doing everything that they can to counteract, prepare for, and minimize those vulnerabilities.
Yep.
And maintain control over their own space.
Yep. That, I mean, we kind of joking on the prepper side, but there is a survivalist posture that can take place. And that doesn't mean that you're you have an arsenal in your basement.
Right.
Ready for the zombie apocalypse. It can, like, the survivalist posture can look like, I have probably the 10 or 15 things I absolutely need to feel strong and oversee my space and not be intruded upon in the ways that I don't want.
Right. My in-laws, I believe that my father-in-law is an 8. We all think that he's an 8, and I think that he leans more on self-preservation than the other 2 types for most of the time, or the other 2 instincts than most of the time. And they live up in the mountains. They live in a neighborhood in Conifer, but they're also like it's still isolated. It's a half an hour into the mountains from a city. They have neighbors, but their nearest neighbor is like more than 200 feet. Like there's distance.
They got a couple
live
of
in the
acres,
mountains. They got space.
Yeah.
And like I said, we've been together for like 15, 16 years, and it was just within the last couple of years that he got a generator.
Right.
A whole house generator, because, as many of us know, there's a lot of things happening with the power grid right now, and
he's making fun of you, Texas.
He is finding himself without like he does not have control over whether or not he has power all of the time. And so he bought a generator and did all of the work to install the generator in such a way that if the power company shuts off power to his house for whatever reason, there's too much snow, there's a wildfire, whatever, he has the ability to just flip a switch and have power again.
The independence.
Yep.
You're just screaming independence there. 8s, especially in this space, don't want to have wants that are dependent on other people to fulfill their need.
Yes.
So what are the and so there can be a very minimalist way of coming to the world. I need my clothes, my computer, I need, this food that's in my freezer. I need power in a microwave.
Yep.
And I'm good to go.
Yep.
And the lack of wants, it's a balancing of lust on one front. We haven't mentioned the passions very much, but there is a balancing here in terms of some of the other expressions of 8ness that are very assertive.
Right.
Here, this is a balancing of the assertiveness of some 8s.
Yeah. Chestnut uses the word satisfaction for this type.
Ooh,
and the way that lust comes through here is about like that making sure that you have what you want. And like a lot of self-preservation 8s have either naturally or by self-training, they have very little wants. My father-in-law is a minimalist.
Right.
He has he has famously thrown away things that belong to the whole family because he didn't want to store them anymore. He does not have needs that require a lot of attention or other people, or he doesn't have the kinds of needs that are vulnerable because he is self-preservation.
Yeah.
And so if the end of the world happened, he has everything that he needs because he doesn't need anything.
Yeah. Mortal sin for the 9s to throw away something, by the way.
Seriously.
We haven't mentioned rhythms yet, and I should have, but 8s have their rhythms. The no-nonsense side of 8s, who this is how I do things in self-pres space, I think can be severe.
Yeah.
They establish control, self-possession, and when my rhythms are upset, then I push back a little bit.
Right. Right. Oh, or move in to reestablish, like to regain control.
Yeah. Yes. Yeah. That would be one of the it's one of the trip lines. Like, oh, you're getting a little
Right.
close because I'm the one who does the crossword puzzle in this house, sir. You know,
Right.
kind of thing.
Right.
This
I
is the
would
rhythm.
never pick up a crossword book in that house. That's not mine to do. I want to.
Have I told you this story? I have to tell you the story just real quick. My grandmother, just on my mom's side, just the sweetest, sugariest Texas Austin woman. She wasn't an 8, but she's in my mom's house. Kelly comes down. They had just met, and Kelly gets a coffee. She grabs the paper and flips to the crossword puzzle. It starts to fill it out. And my grandmother goes, I'm the one that does the crossword in this house. Established. It's like, oh, okay.
And I also want to like make a special note about those rhythms because we're still talking about 8s here.
Yeah.
Who naturally believe that they can order the world according to how they see it.
Yes.
They are extremely self-confident, and like when they decide something, it is decided. It's not up for debate. It's not up for influence. Like the things that they have decided are the things.
Yeah.
And if like the routines, the rhythms that especially self-preservation instinct type, like when 8s are about self-preservation, the rhythms that they have come up with, it doesn't matter if you think they're good rhythms or not.
Right.
They don't care about your opinion on this because they've already decided this is right for them.
This is where the minimalist really plays to the 8.
Yep.
It's like, look, I just have this little space friend.
Mm-hmm.
The territorialness that comes out in saying, I don't have a lot of needs, but in this space, I'm in control, and your rules don't apply here. My rules apply here.
Right.
And this is how things go. This wouldn't be said by an 8 in self-preservation. It would be,
right.
You know, it would again be
it's
stated
just
differently.
Is.
This is just how it is. Yeah.
I really hope that he does never listen to this, but he's not going to because he's an 8 and he doesn't care. But the last time we were at my in-laws' house, I went through the effort of taking the extra blanket off of our bed because I sleep hot and they only have flannel sheets and an extra blanket and another like there's too much on the bed, and I went through the effort of taking the whole thing off and remaking the bed without it. And before we went to bed, he remade the bed. Not because like he wasn't being defiant, he wasn't trying to be a jerk about it. It's just like, oh, this blanket goes on this bed because that is what I decided about how this house works. So he unmade the bed, put the blanket back on, and remade the bed, and then I caught fire in the middle of the night. Not really. But like that it's a great example of like he did not think about me for a second.
He's being
when
helpful.
He decided to remake that bed.
You want what I want.
Yep. The blanket goes on. Like it's not even about you want what I want. It's the blanket goes on the bed. End of sentence.
Yeah. We haven't talked about nesting much, but 8s and nesting is a real thing. Like the home is my sanctuary, pal.
Right.
You know, it's my
and it
house,
is going to be maintained the way I want it to be,
kind of thing.
Yeah.
And so here's how things function.
Right.
And here are the rhythms that we have.
Right.
The
Because this is their resource. This is the space, the physical space that they occupy is one of their resources.
Right.
Because 8s are body types.
Yeah. And probably see their home as an extension of themselves in that sense.
Mm-hmm.
So
yeah. And it all comes back to control and autonomy. Like I think about the way that like thinking about the body and maintaining the body as a resource, like 8s are going to be naturally good at making sure their body is capable of the things that they want it to do.
Right.
And not necessarily like this isn't about being the biggest and the strongest. It's about ensuring like their body is maintaining their body as a resource is not about competition. It's about ensuring that they have control.
Right. It's a famous podcaster who is an 8 who really emphasizes the sexual instinct, but we'll talk about his personal athletic rhythms.
Yeah.
Is really into, I forget what the name of it is. It's grappling is what it is. He really gets into grappling with weight training and grappling is all about subduing a person in front of you through essentially like wrestling techniques.
Sure.
And I see a lot of 8s who are attracted to that. It's very physical.
Yeah.
It's very engaged. If you practice this, you are body on body with another person. And it's very much about not feeling vulnerable.
Right.
In my mind.
Right.
I can manipulate a man's arm in a certain way where he's incapacitated.
Right.
On the flip side here, I do think that 8s who push into self-preservation can still come across as very warm. I think to go back to our temperatures of like pairing types being hot and social types being cool, self-pres, 8s in that space come across as warm. They're not giving you everything. They're not giving you nothing. They're giving you enough to maintain their space and create social alliances.
Yep.
And to partner with this, I think that 8s in this space are way more emotionally aware. I think that this is a spot that 8s really do see how they come across in the world if they come across, as overly assertive. That in self-preservation space, I get the sense that that's a place where that door opens up for them a little bit and they can understand how they come across. And part of that actually is a self-preserving technique. I understand that I come across as an asshole sometimes. You get me, I get me. Let's just name it. But that's being self-aware, and that's establishing boundaries again, and trying to say, okay, this is how I can posture myself for maximum control in the future, especially when it comes to social alliances. Okay,
I don't know that I agree with your broader point, but I do agree with the idea that those 8s who are leaning more into self-preservation, when they do come across warm, it is because of that desire for control.
Yeah.
Or to not be controlled is more accurate, because you can't stiff arm every conversation and expect to get anywhere. You have to interact with people, and sometimes the way to maintain your own autonomy in a relationship is to allow there to be some real space there.
Right. Something that might upset the way that you and I are coming to this is that behind the scenes, as we're looking at our lists and notes, is you're thinking of your father-in-law and I'm thinking about my kid. And and we have very, very, very different relationships.
Yep. Well, and my father-in-law, which I have no qualms saying that I think that he leans more into his self-preservation than he does the other two instincts, is a very warm and personable person. He loves talking to people.
Right.
He will interact with every person that we have to interface with when we go places. He's friendly with all of my staff, and he's a very friendly and engaging person. But I think that is more about him maintaining a sense of his own autonomy and control in any given environment than it is about... Because if he just walks in and is really standoffish, then other people view him a certain way.
Sure. Yep.
Especially because he's like 9 feet tall. He has to be personable to be comfortable in those spaces.
Yeah. I think, just to reemphasize, I think the idea of social alliance is really important there. So, but, and I also imagine if he shifts into a different gear, his relationship with his wife isn't like that. I imagine it's going to be much more intimate and, exposing and not superficial.
Sure.
That would be my assumption.
I'm going to plead the fifth on this one.
In terms of independence, we've hit a lot of this, but in terms of 8s who are self-preserving in their work, you can see, the 8 who would, in order to really feel like they had their space. I'm going to isolate at my job doing this thing. Or I suppose in my house, it's not work. It's actually video games. I have my screen and this is the place I go and I'm doing this. And it's actually a place of security and control that I've plugged into this station and, am not to be disturbed.
Right. Yeah. That need for autonomy, to be outside of the reach of someone else's control. When self-preservation is the thing that is driving the cart, like finding themselves in workspaces where they're answering to a supervisor that is constantly like checking in or micromanaging, like that won't last.
Right.
Because there's no space there. There's no sense of them being able to be in charge of themselves.
Right. Alongside this, independence, we've mentioned preparation alongside independence, but preparation for self-preserving eights may look like a lot of no's to other people's requests.
Yeah. Which is super easy for eights.
Yeah. So here's what you might do. Nope. Here's what you might do. Nope. We could go here. Nope.
Yeah.
And it's all the root of the no is I would probably feel vulnerable and don't want to do that. When the vulnerability is gone, you may, have a little bit more flexibility, but
sure,
that goes alongside the risk adversedness. So it's again kind of doubling down on something here. Risk adverse eights, self-pres eights. That's again, it's just about let's minimize vulnerability.
And I think there's something to mention here that is also, I think, fairly important when talking about these types, is that people in eights in a self-preservation space have the biggest have a really hard time not getting what they want.
Sure.
Like they just have little patience for not being able to enact their will in the world, for not living with the efficiency that they expect.
Right. That's especially if it's in their spheres.
Yeah.
Something they should control.
Yeah. The vulnerability exposed by those kinds of sort of inefficiencies, or like the fact that the power company turns off the power when there's high winds, like that's a huge vulnerability. And it is so upsetting that someone who's lived in his house for more than 30 years spent thousands of dollars on a generator that he might use once a year.
Right. It's insurance is what it is.
Yeah.
It's not being left. Every metaphor coming up in my head is dirty. You don't want to be exposed, pal.
Yeah. And it has to do with the deep frustration. Like this is part of where that lust comes in. Like the deep frustration of having to do something you don't want to do. Yeah. Especially when you are a body and control type. Yeah. Is infuriating.
I mean, that move towards insurance, as it were, that there's also a stress move there of getting into your 5 space and as well. But again, it's on my list. Minimizing discomfort is the target.
Yeah.
And so for the 8, what does that look like? And it looks probably something like this. Also, minimizing discomfort alongside 9s probably, and maybe even 7s, means having outfits that aren't very attractive. I've seen lots of
sometimes
8s in self-pres space who, I don't dress well. I do realize this. However,
no, you dress fine after years of training.
I know some self-pres 8s who love themselves a moo-moo is all I'm saying. It's like that kind of thing. It's like, I don't care what people think. This is what I dress like in my space. And it's, and it kind of has that texture. It's like, there's the lust. It's like overly cushy. Yeah. Sort of, I'm wearing a sleeping bag.
Right.
I suppose to circle back to the power generator, the last thing on my list is assets and tools. And that's also what that is. It's, it's what can I rely on?
Yeah. And having everything I need so that I don't have to rely on someone else.
Yeah. Right.
Yeah.
So TJ and I work with a fantastic gentleman who's an 8, and there's just a couple tools that he is really insistent on.
Right.
But he's insistent on them, you know.
Right.
And
Yeah.
the primary reason he likes these tools is because when he has to serve 200 people drinks in less than 10 minutes, he needs this thing or else he feels vulnerable. And it's not just vulnerable like there's demands. It's vulnerable in that he's not going to get paid.
Right.
So
Well, and even to take something a little more, let's say, menial, he also would prefer that we purchase a floor buffer instead of having to rent one every time we need it.
Okay.
Because if we have to rent it, then he has to go pick it up, and he has to talk to the people, and he has to bring it back by a certain time. And what if it doesn't work? Then he has to return it, and all of the possible contingencies of things that might go wrong and make him and force him to not be in charge of what he's doing anymore.
Oh, there you go. Yeah, you're at the whim of somebody else when you have a rental contract.
Hates it.
Yeah.
And like we need that floor buffer once a quarter.
Yeah.
Maybe, and it costs pennies to rent it. It's not pennies, but it's like the.
I love how both you and I are going to say no to the floor buffer in two very different ways. Yours is going to be, it's inexpensive, and who cares about cleaning anyway?
Not a big deal. Well, but also like he would then have to also store it,
and that
in
would
the
be
space that has minimal. Like we're really struggling with storage space.
That would be my argument.
He would have to. But he wouldn't care. That would not be an obstacle to him because it is better for him to have complete control of this.
Correct.
And he's still in control of where it gets stored.
Yep. Yeah, that's where my mind goes, is we don't have enough space. But then I go, you know what? You're in control of that space, so you make it happen. I don't care.
Your thing. That's fine.
But I'm probably going to be the one that has to pay for the silly thing. Because that's how this business works.
But I'm like seeing that like from the self-preservation side of things. Like if you have to go to the grocery store to get something that you need, then you're not independent. You're not autonomous. If you have to go rent a floor buffer once a quarter, then you're not fully autonomous. You're not in control of when you get to use that floor buffer and whether or not it works.
Yeah. My child pointed this out, and it's just a great line. And I think it applies to 2s and 5s as well, that 8s don't want to have wants.
Yeah.
And that's the thing.
Mm-hmm.
And so a huge part of my relationship with my child presently is not trying to connect with them through what I provide. And it's very, very difficult for me.
Sure.
I need to connect to my 8 child through what they do for me. And I'm not naturally that sort of person. So, but that looks like them teaching me games. That looks like them helping with things that I can easily do in 12 seconds that will take them an hour. And yet, elevating them into spaces where that is agency, that's autonomy, that's not having needs.
Yeah.
All these things. Anyway.
Yeah.
Bang. That's what I got for 8s. You got any last words on 8s?
Nothing I can think of.
We went around the circle.
We went around the circle. It only took us a month.
I was not anticipating 4 hours on one instinct. Such is this podcast. That's just how it goes, I suppose.
Yeah.
Well, we'll see how much time we spend on the other ones.
I'm guessing it'll be comparable.
I'm trying to jam in recordings for these next 2 recordings. My ideals are going to get thwarted.
It happens.
All right, well, friends.
Just go with the flow, man. Just go with the flow.
2 big things before you take off. One, we have our Start Here podcast. I imagine if you're listening to our Instincts podcast, you pretty much know your type. But you have friends, you have loved ones who are just getting into Enneagram. Send them there. This is our tool for getting people into Enneagram and finding their type. Much better than a test, much better than a book. In our mind, we've set it up such that it's really easy to find your type and really connect with the material, the basics of your type. And you can find that at the Start Here podcast, and just look for the Enneagram circle that we got. The other one is our movie typing podcast is out there, and still lots of great stuff there if you get into film and story and TV shows. There's all sorts of good stuff there, and music. We do lots of music stuff. I actually want to do another music podcast. This is on my mind here recently. I love the hell out of our music stuff.
Yeah. And when we start to have that conversation, I'll remind you of how badly you felt about the last series we did for like the several weeks following it.
That's TJ, do you know me?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
I re-listened to that series and it's amazing.
It is really good. Yeah.
But I'm just I just get kind of critical of myself. Music here is by Brian Claxton. Music up front is by The Collection, who has a new album out. You should go check out their new album. It's free on the Spotify. And that's what I got. You got anything else?
I got nothing, man.
CJ Wilson. He officially spoke for over 2 hours, just monopolizing all the time. I'm looking at my recording, dear listener, you can see the waves of sound, and I clearly just needed to talk today, apparently. So I apologize. And I'm Jeff Cook. I speak way too much, but who you aren't just isn't interesting. TJ did not laugh at that joke, or at least held it in for a bit.
I laughed.